This is Pet Life Radio. Let's talk pets.
Welcome to Save a Pooch on Pet Life Radio. Thank you for listening in today. I am Beverly Isla, your host. In this episode, we welcome Anne Abel, the author behind the new book, Mattie, Milo, and Me. So Anne's journey with her rescue dogs not only inspires, but also shows the impact of canine companionship on the human spirit during dark times. So when we get back from these messages, we will hear from author Anne Abel.
Take a bite out of your competition. Advertise your business with an ad in Pet Life Radio podcasts and radio shows. There is no other pet-related media that is as large and reaches more pet parents and pet lovers than Pet Life Radio. With over 7 million monthly listeners, Pet Life Radio podcasts are available on all major podcast platforms, and our live radio stream goes out to over 250 million subscribers on iHeartRadio, Odyssey, TuneIn, and other streaming apps. For more information on how you can advertise on the #1 pet podcast and radio network, visit PetLifeRadio.com/advertise today.
Let's Talk Pets on PetLifeRadio.com.
Welcome back to Save a Pooch. We are talking with Anne Abel, the author behind the new release book, Mattie, Milo, and Me. I really appreciate you taking the time today, and congratulations on its completion.
Well, thank you. Thank you, and thank you.
So let's start off with the meaning behind the memoir that you've captured in this book. I know it's a lot. So yeah, can you share with us the emotional journey?
My middle son was born saying the word dog, and his first complete sentence was, "I want a dog." And I did not want a dog. I wanted to be a good mother. I had no interest in dogs. They were work. They had to walk them. You know, they wrecked your house. It was just, when I went to people's houses and they got their wet noses on me, I did not want a dog. So for 10 years, I appeased him with every kind of caged and tank animal there is. And on his 10th birthday, right before his 10th birthday, I saw a headline that said, "African hedgehog, the perfect pet." So I said, "Well, how would you like that for your birthday?" He really wanted a dog, but he said, "Okay." So I called the pet store to get directions. This was way back. And the man who answered said, "Well, you know, they're really porcupines and you have to handle them with gloves." And my heart just sank. We had enough of these animals. It was time for the dog. And I'm not a shopper. I looked at 3 houses before I bought my house. I need an appliance. I just go, I get one that's good enough. But good enough was not going to cut it with the dog. So I got a book, 450-page book with every kind of rescue. I was asking people about their dogs. And one day my older son came home from a teammate's house excited about a Wheaten Terrier. I looked it up in the book. They did everything but empty the dishwasher. This was my dog.
Oh, wow.
I called the breeder. She said, "Okay, we'll put you on the list for May." It was January. I hung up the phone thinking sometimes it's just so easy to be a good mother. May was a lifetime away. Anything could happen. 3 days later, she called me up and she said, "We have this 10-month-old dog named Mattie. We were going to use her as a show dog, but her neck's too short. If you come out this weekend, we'll meet the boys. You can meet Mattie. You can take her home if everything works out." Again, my heart just sank. But what was I going to do? So Sunday, my 3 boys and my husband piled into the car. I walked through my house thinking it is never going to look like this again. And I got in the car. I suffered with depression. And if they were talking, I just didn't hear them on the hour ride to the breeder. We get to the breeder. They meet the kids. They like them. They say, "Go in the kitchen and we'll send Mattie up." So I'm standing there with my family, pretty comatose. Just, this is like I've been dreading this for 10 years. And this white ball of fluff comes bounding into the kitchen. She circles us, and then she kind of lands on me. And I sit down, I hug her, and I am in love. This was like, she was perfect. She was no work. All she wanted to do was give love and take love. She taught us a game. I don't know how she taught it, called Family Hug. And if two of us were together, she'd start running around and we'd go, family hug, family hug. And she'd go, it was like Duck, Duck, Goose, only there were no losers. And she, she was wonderful. 7 years later, one day, one December, I came home, I let her out. I still had my jacket on and the doorbell rings. I open it. It's a UPS man. Ma'am, I'm sorry. I just hit your dog and killed her.
No.
Oh my God. I just collapsed to the floor. I mean, I just was sobbing and sobbing and sobbing. And when I could finally stand up, I called Mattie's breeder. I knew that getting another dog wasn't going to make me miss Mattie less, but with my depression, I was just terrified that without a distraction from the void left by Mattie, I would be pushed into the abyss. So he wasn't breeding anymore. I went after from one dog. I mean, I was in shock, basically, but I went from one year to the next. It was before Christmas. A lot of them yelled at me for wanting to get a dog, and I'd be returning it after Christmas. And I called and left a voicemail on an acquaintance, not someone I didn't know very well, but she had 5 dogs, a few pedigree, and a few rescues, a couple rescues. And the next morning she called me, like at 8:30, and she said, well, the breeder for my Bijans, it's going to be months. I don't think you want to wait that long. Would you take a rescue? And I heard myself say, I'll take anything. So she volunteered for a rescue in the neighborhood, and she said, I'll call the owner and tell him to call you. And within 5 minutes, the man called. I said, I want a small lap dog that doesn't shed. He said, oh, we have lots of dogs, but let me tell you about Milo. So, and he said, come out and meet him. If you don't like him, we have lots of dogs. So we go out and he's waiting for us in a sunny meadow with Milo. And we go down. Milo is a beautiful, like sphinx-like dog with soulful eyes and white oversized paws. We nicknamed him Mellow Milo. And this was our dog. But then reality struck and I realized he was like 4 or 5 times bigger than what I wanted. So I said, okay, you said you had other dogs. Could we see them? He said, sure, come in the waiting room. I'll put Milo back. And 2 minutes later, he lets loose this Bichon named Scooter, who was aptly named because he was just ricocheting off the walls. And my youngest son, one of least words in our family, said, take Scooter back. We want Milo. And
What kind of breed was Milo?
Well, we've come to learn Heinz 57 is what they called him. So this very savvy rescue guy, he says, okay, fine. And I'm like, can we take him home tonight? And that's like for later, but my 2 sons had wanted to wait, but I'll get into that later. But I wanted to take him home that night. And then the guy said, okay, well, I'll bathe him. I'll bring him to you tomorrow. But let me take you through the kennels. It was December of 2001. He said, we have lots of dogs from New York, who are displaced by the World Trade Center tragedy. Maybe you have friends who want a dog. So we're going through, it's dark and cold in December. And the dogs they're all in cages and they're throwing themselves at the cages when they see us and barking. And then we walk by Milo's cage and he's just curled up on a bed of rags, just looking at us. So Josh turns and my youngest son turns and we can take Milo. We'll take Milo tomorrow. So the guy drops Milo off the next day. Within 3 hours, he was humping and jumping, howling. Within a few days, he bit 2 of my sons.
Oh,
and
geez.
I was bandaging the bloody wrist of one of them. He said to me, I bet they sedated Milo at the rescue before we got there. As soon as he said it, it was obvious. And my first instinct, I was really pissed. And I thought, I'm bringing this monster back. But then I remembered him on that bed of rags and I just couldn't do it. So someone had told me about a school called What a Good Dog! ! So I called there and they said, okay, you have to come for an interview. And meanwhile, he was just terrorizing our house. We were practically hiding under the beds. I take him for walks, he pulled me in front of a school bus. I was on my belly, an arm's length away from the school bus that had come to a screech. And I listened to one of your podcasts. You had a man on he was CEO of Dog Training Elite, Mark Smith.
Yes.
And he was talking about connecting with, should you connect with your dog at first? Is that important? And matching a dog to an owner. And I'll tell you, I pulled Milo onto the sidewalk after that school bus thing. And after everyone left, because I didn't want them looking at me after all the traffic passed, I just started screaming, I hate you. I hate you. And again, I thought of taking him back to the rescue, but I just couldn't do it. And it was like I couldn't live with him, but I knew I couldn't live with myself.
Right.
So I just started making and then I went to a dog park. I couldn't go on the streets anymore. And I'm walking around. I'd never been to a dog park before. And I'm walking around with this woman who had 5 rescues. And Milo is barking and I'm trying to talk to her. And by the time we made one revolution around the park, she stopped and she said, there's a lot of dogs at the rescue more deserving than this one. You should send him back and get him.
Ouch.
Yeah. And so but I'm making a list of all the problems. So when we go for our interview, I can tell all my problems. So we go. Milo's sitting with my husband just perfectly. My 2 sons are with, and I'm just telling the woman all the problems because I really, really want help. And then I pause to see if she wants to analyze them herself. And she says, you need to return Milo. The owner of the rescue knew you were vulnerable. He should never have given this dog to you. You're the 3rd family he's been placed with in 18 months. And that was it. And I just got up and we all walked out. My kids were really angry. Even though they hadn't wanted to adopt a dog, they were just so angry that I had told and I had said to her, well, look at him. He's so good. Because that's just because he's stressing. He's been through this before. So anyhow, I spent the next 6 months just completely immersed. I got help from What a Good Dog ! And 6 months of really intense training. And then we were graduating and I was so happy. And then she said to me, you've got to go with Milo every day to the woods for an hour so he can be the dog he was meant to be, which I hate nature. I don't like walking alone in the woods, but I did it every day for 10 years.
Good for you. Wow.
And I will tell you, and I would be trudging along the path. It was just, whether it was wearing crampons for the ice or boots for the mud, but then I'd see him come soaring across the path. And for those moments, my heart would just soar with him to see this animal who could have been stuck in a cage on a bed of rags.
Yeah.
Being the creature he was born to be.
Clearly, he needed to let loose his energies.
So that's how I came to have Mattie and Milo.
Wow. That's amazing that you did it. 2 rescue dogs back to back. But we're just going to go on a quick break. And afterwards, we're going to go into how Mattie and Milo helped you navigate through your periods of grief and depression. Okay. So we're just going to have a quick break. And when we get back, we'll continue talking with Anne Abel, author of Mattie, Milo, and Me.
Molly, here's your dinner. Zeus, that's not your food.
Don't let that happen to your precious cat. Elevate your cat's eating experience with the Cat Tree Tray. The Cat Tree Tray keeps your cat's food off the floor and conveniently located on the cat tree. It's the perfect way to eat. It's a beautiful wrought iron tray that easily attaches to your cat tree and keeps dogs and other critters out of your cat's dish. A must for multi-pet households. There's a 6-inch tray for large bowls and a 4-inch tray for smaller bowls. Purchase your Cat Tree Tray today. Go right now to cattreetray.com. That's cattreetray.com. cattreetray.com.
Let's talk pets.
Let's talk pets
On Pet Life Radio.
Pet Life Radio.
PetLifeRadio.com.
Welcome back to Save a Pooch. We are talking with author Anne Abel. So before the break, we touched on how she came about rescuing 2 dogs when she wasn't a dog person. So that's amazing that you converted. Yay! So let's get into what was happening in your life and how they impacted you through that period of time.
Well, Mattie wasn't a rescue. She was from a breeder, but
right. Okay.
And she was just basically a really sweet stuffed animal dog who all she wanted to do was give love and take love, which is really good for someone suffering with depression. And I'd be sitting at my desk working and she'd be there and I'd look at her and I would just feel so good. And then we'd go down and have a snack. She'd go out. I mean, she was just such a nice, warm companion. She was just lovely. And it just would always make me feel good to look at her, to be with her, to snuggle with her. It was kind of a no-brainer. Then
Right.
I got Milo, and I got Milo so quickly because I wanted a distraction from, after, right after. And he was a distraction. I mean, I didn't have time to think of, I still missed Mattie, but I had to be so vigilant. I mean, every minute of every day, I was I was what was keeping him and keeping him from the rest of attacking the rest of the world, and also from having to go, if he did something horrible, he would have had to go back to the rescue. I went to dog, and what a good dog school it was. What a good dog. The hardest thing was I'm not an alpha. Any alpha I had in me was beaten out in childhood. But the teacher, she would start yelling at me. And like one day I was just standing there and I was talking to her, and we had told him to sit. This is at the beginning. And then he just starts kind of walking around smelling, and she says, Anne. And I'm like, what? She said, you're supposed to be the alpha, not Milo, so I had to really, with my kids, I never had to be an alpha. They were just easy. It was just natural for me to parent them. But with Milo, I had to really force myself. I don't like training people. I don't like controlling them. But in the end, it really was distracting getting him. And even though I didn't like him, I hated him at the very beginning. And I even tried, we had a carpenter working at our house the first couple weeks. He was 25 years old, 30, he wore work boots. He had a German Shepherd at home. And Milo loved him. He would go sidle up to him. And I asked him if he would take Milo, and he said no. And I was really glad Milo didn't understand what was going on. But what happened was, even though I was doing all these things with Milo that were outside my comfort zone, things that I never would have wanted to do if given the choice, we were doing these intense things. Like the teacher said I had to go into crowded places with this dog. And I'm like, are you crazy? I'm taking so we did these really high stress things together. I bonded with, when you're doing things like that, you bond in a certain way. And then also, he was a quick learner. And even though he was always a bit wild to the day he died, he understood what I was trying to do with him. And we would kind of make believe that I was the alpha most of the time. And I fell in love with him. And I learned that there are different kinds of love. My love for him was different than my love for Mattie. But when I would come, he'd be waiting for me in the car or at home, and I'd come home and he'd see me and his Lion King tail would do a 180-degree swish. What's not to love about that? That someone's happy to see you.
Exactly. And it's great that it seems like he, almost forced you to get out of your shell. That wouldn't have been
absolutely
done
forced me. And if I had known on day one what was in store for me for the next 10 years, I probably would have still done it because I just didn't have the heart to send him back. But I would have been, I was taking it one day at a time. Everything was one day at a time. And then I never liked taking him to the woods, but I never missed a day. And I did it because it was good for Milo and I felt really good. And you know what? There wasn't a day that went by in the 10 years we had him that I didn't think of the dog curled up on the bed of rags and then compare him to the dog he was now. And it just made me feel really good to have been able to help a living being this way.
Yeah, you've come a long way, it seems, especially because he never even liked dogs in the beginning.
No, right.
So I love seeing that kind of transformation. And you bring up a good point, which is the debate around should someone with grief need time to recover before getting another dog. And I was actually just talking about this with my cousin because she recently lost her dog. And she's wondering, should I give myself time or should I just jump in and get another dog? I honestly have no answer for that. But you've gone through, I guess, not taking the time and just went for the other dog, and it did work in your favor. Do you think, what factors do you believe that individuals should consider when contemplating, getting another dog while still processing grief?
Well, I mean, obviously everybody's different.
For sure.
And the way I function and the way I function with my depression is, action and activity keeps me more buoyed. So doing things is better. But to be honest, my husband and I were a little worried that adopting a dog the day after one was killed, that would make our kids think that living beings are just replaceable.
That's a good
So
point.
we called my therapist, who knows me better than I know me, and we talked about it. And she said our boys, two who were home, were 13 and 17. So she said she thought they were old enough and secure enough to understand that beings aren't replaceable. And she also thought they were old enough to have the experience of doing for me. I was usually doing for them, but for them to consider my situation. So we went to the day after Mattie was killed, we went to school to pick them up, and then we were going to the rescue. And I told them what we were going to do. And the two boys each said that if it were up to them, they would wait. They weren't ready to get another dog, but they understood my depression and how I was home all day. And so her absence would be felt the most by me. And I also pointed two things out to them: that if I hadn't loved Mattie so much, I wouldn't be rushing out to get another dog. And if we got another dog, at least one living being in this world would be better off for Mattie having been killed. I mean, it was just such a horrible tragedy, but at least one creature would be better off. But and I was on the beach. I now have 3 little rescues.
Oh, geez. That's awesome.
With them like 10 years ago. And this man in his 70s came over to me to pat them and talk about dogs. And I asked him if he, had one. He said, well, I had them all my life, but I can't go through the heartbreak of losing another dog, which I completely understand.
Yeah, I
And
sympathize with that.
And we have a 19-and-a-half-year-old Chihuahua who is actually in the last chapter of Mattie, Milo, and me, because we went to the same rescue to get him the day after Milo died. But he's 19 and a half, and he's defied death a few times. And we're trying to be really vigilant that we're keeping him alive for him and not for us. And he's completely incontinent, which you don't put a dog down for that. And it's so much work, but we do it. But then last weekend, actually, he was having trouble walking on the hardwood floors and the bathroom and floors. And my husband went into the bathroom at one point, and Ryan had peed on the floor, and he was just lying there in his pee. He just couldn't get up. And I didn't sleep for 3 nights thinking that maybe this was the moment. And I think you forget how horrible it is to lose one of your dogs until it actually happens. And then a friend of mine she's like a dog whisperer. We had her come over Sunday night, and we're actually out of town, and she takes care of him. And she's no nonsense, but she said she didn't think it was time, and she took him home with her, and he's doing okay. But it's heartbreaking to imagine a world without this living being that you've been with for so long and that you love so much.
Yeah.
You can't avoid death, but if you move on and get another dog, you're opening your heart up for more love, and especially a rescue. If you get a rescue dog, you just think about how you're making this being's life so much better.
Absolutely. For sure. That's always the thought that I get when I foster a dog and let it go, and I'm bummed out about that. It's who or which dog am I going to get to help next because of that? So I totally understand where you're coming from. Now, before we wrap up this episode, I really wanted to get your take on what you think people who are considering adopting a rescue dog, especially those with, behavioral issues that are common. You've gone through that. What advice would you have so that they don't quickly, I guess, return the dog?
Right.
You stuck it out, which is awesome.
I'll tell you, I pretty quickly, within a week or 10 days, I mean, the jungle drums of the dog world beat really loud. I didn't even know there was
jungle drums.
I didn't know there was such a thing. And the head of the school, the owner of the school, she just appeared at our house. And I would say, get an expert. I could never have done this without expert help. And, I had my doubts, but I trusted her. And she kept saying, he would be biting people. I thought she would say, no, you have to give him back. And she kept saying, I have lots of tricks in my bag. If one doesn't work, first she said, give it a month. Let's see. But I just trusted her implicitly. And like when she told me to take him into a crowd, I just looked at her and then I'm like, okay. I really say, get someone you trust. And at first I joked with her. I said, could you take him? Like, do you have boarding school? And she said, Anne, that wouldn't even help you. You have to do the
You
work.
have to learn.
Yeah, so my
Yeah.
first lesson in dog school was don't talk facetiously with Mary. But I just so believe in getting, whether it was for my kids, if they had problems, just get expert help. And I think you can really save yourself and your dog a lot of trouble if you get the help and follow through on it.
Absolutely. Now, it would have helped if, like you mentioned, when you went to the rescue, if they indeed sedated the dog so you wouldn't see the real characteristics,
Right.
it would have helped.
Apparently I've heard it's not that uncommon. So, maybe,
No, I've never heard. Oh, wow. Okay.
I don't know, maybe people are just saying it, but I'm telling you, it was night and day, that dog, from when we met him to the next. I mean, he was just terrorizing us.
Jeez. Come on, rescue organizations.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't know. Maybe it's not true, but anyhow, we got really good help and someone I trusted. So even if I were doing things that I didn't completely understand, and they worked, I'm telling you, and when I didn't follow her directions, I got myself in trouble. So,
How long did it take you?
well, it took 6 months of school. I mean, constant, constant, behavior modification. And then for 10 years, I had to go to the woods every day for an hour.
Yeah.
It was a lifelong thing with him. And I'll tell you, a week before he ended up getting cancer, he was diagnosed Monday and Friday he died. But a week before he was diagnosed, some food fell out of the refrigerator. My husband went to grab it, but the rule kind of was if it falls on the floor, it's Milo's. And Milo bit my husband, But that's what happened. People would go, you've got to get rid of that animal. But he wasn't an animal. He was part of our family, and we should know better. When it landed on the floor, just leave it. So get expert advice and follow the advice.
I agree. Well, thank you so much, Anne, for taking the time. We are out of time, and I really appreciate you here. And thanks to our show producer, Mark Winter, for making the show possible. Now, you can follow Anne Abel's work at anneabelauthor.com and her social media, which will also be on the show notes page. Keep an eye on her book, and we look forward to seeing the launch of it. Thank you, Anne.
Thank you, Beverly.
You're welcome. If you have any questions, comments, or ideas for a show, please email me, beverly@petliferadio.com. So until next time, spread animal compassion.
Let's Talk Pets, every week on demand, only on PetLifeRadio.com.